once so we're probably live right now, just to let you know.
It says meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah. So now, like I said, I have to pull the address and then just to update it on the site.
Okay.
It'll just be a moment here.
Live on YouTube.
Yeah. So now, like I said, okay. Here we go. So I'll just take a moment here to update this. Thanks for your patience, everyone. It's a little strange thing I have to do to get this live. Okay, there we go. That should do it. All right. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's all. Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to NDs for Truth, Naturopathic Doctors for Truth. I'm here today with Karen Selleck, who obtained her LLB, or Bachelor of Law. She's a former lawyer, degree at the University of Toronto in 1976. She retired from practicing law in 2015 and then spent 2 years studying holistic nutrition at the Edison Institute of Nutrition. She has been a freelance writer for over 30 years, and her work has appeared in the Freeman, Fraser Forum, the National Post, the Globe and Mail, Canadian Lawyer magazine, and elsewhere. She now owns keeneyesediting.ca and is doing lots of wonderful things these days. So welcome, Karen. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me on.
It's really great. I'm just going to give a really short spiel about NDs for Truth. We're an organization that intends to have discussions where where we're seeing censorship. We don't require everybody to agree, but we would like to have these open discussions where people feel free to share their opinions about things without getting censored, blacklisted, canceled, or shamed by peers and different organizations. So today we're having a discussion about some of the events that have occurred where there is actually some silencing and gagging of naturopathic doctors that is occurring. We'll get into that in just a moment. I'd like to ask you, Karen, what got you into your awareness today, your involvement in matters of this nature? If you can just give us a little background so we could get to know you about that.
Yeah, sure. I've been fighting big government, I suppose, all my adult life. So some of the things that I read back when I was in high school even inspired me to think that there are better ways of doing things than having the government run everything. And so my political philosophy, I call libertarian. So I've been a libertarian for 50 years. And after retiring as a lawyer, nutrition has been something that has always interested me. I've been a member of the Life Extension Foundation for probably 20 years. So I studied that, and now I have gone to naturopathic doctors in the past. I'm very shocked by what's going on now, the state of the world. It's sort of like all my adult life I've been preparing for what's happening now, which is, huge government intrusion in everybody's business, everybody's life. And so here I am wanting to help fight this.
That's fantastic. That's commendable. I feel the same way. Can you give us some examples of what you would consider to be government intrusion, and in such a way where it's beyond what they might or should do? Just give us some taste of that.
Like right now, everything. I don't wear a mask, for instance. I think the whole masking requirements are bizarre. I think there's plenty of evidence that masks are doing more harm than good. The social distancing stuff too, I think is ridiculous. These, little bubbles we're supposed to be in, not having family members and friends visit, all of that is, in my view, unnecessary. I think that it's well known to anybody that has ever studied nutrition that there are things you can do to optimize your immune system. And the government has been entirely silent on that. So all these so-called public health authorities, nobody is talking about what vitamins you should have, the fact that you need certain minerals, you need zinc, magnesium. All of these things are absolutely crucial in order for our immune systems to operate properly, and nobody's talking about that. So,
Right.
they're doing everything wrong. I can't imagine them doing anything worse. Well, I guess I could, and it's coming.
Yes. And in fact, naturopathic doctors, for instance, in Ontario, are not even allowed to suggest what people might do to protect themselves from COVID, for instance. Uh, what do you think about that in terms
Yeah.
of, but I also like your perspective as a lawyer. So both your perspective as human being, researcher, living person, and lawyer, I'd like to hear both what you think about the fact that naturopathic doctors can't, for instance, suggest that to the public, what you just said about what helps to boost your immune system for these times.
Okay, so I think there might actually be a way that they could say this that would be legal. So, for instance, when I talk about the immune system, I never say boost it. I always say optimize it. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think you can pretty easily make the case that there are certain things that we need. Our immune system functions because it has zinc in it, for instance, and you can say, well, you have to have the right amount of zinc. I think that people have been getting into trouble, at least from the cases that I've seen where naturopaths are getting into trouble. It's because they are making claims. Well, in one case, the naturopathic doctor who's being actually disciplined right now, she actually used the phrase boost the immune system, and she specifically referred to COVID. So that's what got her into trouble. I'm not saying that she should have gotten into trouble. I think that is misguided, but I think
Yes.
that there might have been ways for her to have said, you can optimize your immune system to deal with pathogens, and that might have just, sort of gone under the radar. But by using the word COVID, that sort of like they descended.
Yeah, and
So
I also saw that she said, I have this scientifically researched and backed formula that could really help to boost your immune system. And if you should be diagnosed as positive for COVID, then we would just increase the dosage of that,
yeah.
the amount that you're taking.
So I don't know whether people are actually aware of this. I mean, this is now public information because it's published on the website of the College of Naturopaths of Ontario, that they're actually disciplining this Dr. Natasha Turner. So, and she's the one that we're referring to here.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Like, I mean, I just from one of the things I've noticed about CONA, the College of Naturopaths of Ontario, is they fling a lot of legal jargon, and it's a little bit confusing. It's a little bit misleading, but just in really simple terms for non-legal types like myself, like I'm not very well versed. What do you just simply think in terms of from a humanistic perspective, from a rational, critical thinking perspective, that naturopathic doctors are not allowed, not entitled to make suggestions for people and mention, because there's this pandemic going on, a lot of people are afraid, but mention, hey, this can help. What do you think about that?
Well, when I found out actually from a friend who is a naturopathic doctor, I found out from her that another ND in Ontario had received a letter from the college saying that by signing her name to your statement on naturopaths, what do you call it, NDs for truth,
Yeah.
she could be in violation of, the whatever code of conduct they have, and she could subject herself to discipline as a result. When I found that out, my first reaction was to say, what has happened to the College of Naturopaths? Because like I have gone to a naturopathic doctor because I want something different than what MDs will tell me. I want a different perspective. I want people to be talking about the immune system and how to make it work properly. So just as an ordinary human being, I'm shocked that it seems like they have abandoned their raison d'etre. They've abandoned their whole purpose.
I think that's become more and more clear.
Yeah.
Definitely that they've abandoned their purpose and what a naturopathic doctor might stand for. But even on that page, if you look at the narrative that mainstream and the health organizations in the United States, for instance, and Health Canada, there's nothing that can be done for COVID. There's no cure. The only possible solution is the vaccination. So even medical doctors have stood up, like the frontline doctors who have stood up on Capitol Hill to say, hey, we're doing pretty good with our patients, giving hydroxychloroquine. And we want the government to take off the sanctions against it. They're getting censored too.
Yeah. I'm appalled at what's going on. I mean, over the 50 years that I've been involved in, trying to reduce the size of government, I have seen little creeping incursions in all these areas, what's going on at the universities and what's going on in different places. But I never really realized that the net was just drawing closed like that. And here we are with sort of being bombarded from all sides with this stuff.
Yeah. Do you see like an overarching picture taking place? Do you connect the dots to say, hey, what's going on? Like you connect the dots of the different things that are happening around the world. Do you have any sense of like a map of reality on Earth right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand the motivations of the people who are, at the top of this, but I certainly think there's abundant evidence that Bill Gates and the Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum, those people seem to be pulling all the strings. They seem to be trying to drive everyone into a position where they will have no choice but to accept a vaccine or accept, in essence, permanent house arrest or permanent confinement in what they call an isolation facility, one or the other. They're going to try and force people into those positions where they're either you stay home or you stay in our isolation facility until you get a vaccination, and then maybe we'll let you out. And the problem, of course, that I'm concerned about is that this isn't just any ordinary vaccination that you might be able to detox from afterwards. This is going to be a vaccination that has, an identity code as part of it.
Yes.
And so once you get that, you never go back. You never go back to not having that ID code that they can track.
Absolutely. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, with this vaccine, is it's an mRNA vaccine. It might be a DNA as well, but this has never been tried on a large scale, and they're really rushing the test. Normally, I even saw an interview with Bill Gates himself, the man himself, out of the horse's mouth. He said, normally it takes like 5 years to properly study a vaccine to see all of its effects. And then now, I mean, we just got hit less than a year ago, and they're already doing trials. Like, where did these vaccines come from? And my concern is for this vaccine, the RNA vaccine, is that it's altering the genetic expression of our own cells to produce the antigens of the virus. Like, whoever thought of that probably didn't think too far ahead about what that might cause in the body.
Well, I mean, maybe they just haven't, or they're either they haven't studied it, or they just are willing to overlook it because they're going to earn billions of dollars from it. But I read one book on GMO foods that was extraordinary. It was written by a lawyer who went through all the problems. He also seemed to have studied biology quite well, and so he went through on a scientific basis what all the problems are with GMO foods, and how the genetic modifications are achieved, and what the possible consequences are, where things can go wrong at different stages, and how it can make frankenfoods. If anybody who's read that stuff, I don't think you can sort of go back and say, oh, everything's fine. It's not fine. Those things are, we don't know anywhere near enough to say that everything's fine if you start genetically modifying things.
Right. And one thing that some people are concerned about, I would put myself into that, is that when there's a patent on these genetic modifications. So to me, it's absurd that a person could own a patent on anything that comes from nature. If you modify the nature and you own the patent on that genetic modification, well, then you own that piece of nature. Well, some people are concerned that this might be an opening for whoever's behind this to take some claim as to be owning part of the human bodies because they have that genetic code.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about that too. And in fact, for a couple of decades, probably, I would say that I've been an opponent of patent law per se. I think that there's problems with the whole concept of patent law. It's a coercive monopoly granted by the state. There's no reason why knowledge should not be used by more than one person. It's not quite the same as copyright law, where it's pretty clear that two people aren't going to write the same piece of music or aren't going to write the same book. But patents, people can approach different types of inventions in different directions, and I don't see any reason why the first guy who happens to have his patent application land on the patent application desk, I don't see why that person should get a monopoly and everybody else is cut out. That doesn't make any sense to me from a free market point of view. And there's a lot of libertarians who actually criticize those aspects of patent law. So I've had problems with patent law for a long time, and this is just one step more that is problematic.
Yes, absolutely. That's very interesting. I wasn't familiar with that idea. And I've even heard some stories, of scientists discovering the same thing at the same time, and perhaps inventors inventing the same exact thing at the same time. Why should one be denied where the other one got their foot in the door just that much sooner?
Yeah, that's my argument. Yeah, I mean, there was a case here in Canada, probably about 15 or 20 years ago now, where somebody had genetically modified, like Roundup Ready corn, I think it was. The pollen or whatever blew across. Maybe it was wheat. I don't know. The pollen blew into his field, and so he grew this stuff. And Monsanto, that has now been incorporated into Bayer, they sued him, and they won. And I think that decision went to the Supreme Court of Canada. It was one of the worst decisions they ever made, because it has just
sometimes
decision.
It's just common sense, like just like, how is that person to blame for the nature's process of, like, pollination and all that stuff? I agree with you. Terrible decision. Another really bad decision that we're seeing in our naturopathic community is that CCNM is attempting and has, put its lot in to train naturopathic doctors to administer the COVID-19 vaccination.
Yeah.
And, for a college that has been for quite some time really making full efforts to be evidence-based and scientific, I wonder where they're getting their incentive from with this very unscientific, not research, not safe vaccination. We don't know anything about it. How could they be pushing the syringes and lowering vaccine hesitancy? What do you think about that, Karen?
Yeah, again, my naturopathic doctor friend sent me that a couple of weeks ago, something that she had received from the college as an alumna, saying, we want the naturopathic doctors to be able to vaccinate, and we want them to, because so many of our patients are the vaccine hesitant people, and they trust us. Yeah. We're therefore, it's just like a complete betrayal, I think, of of what the reason that people go to naturopaths. Yeah, I go to a naturopath because I trust my naturopath to do something different and to use her own judgment. And for them to turn around and say, well, we'll take all those people and we'll lead them into vaccination. Don't you worry. I was shocked by that. But then I found out that the person who had written that, I think, is actually an MD himself. And the people who are actually now, I'm not entirely clear on this, but I know that some of the people who are administering either the College of Medicine, Naturopathic Medicine, or the College of Naturopaths of Ontario, some of those people are actually people who have come in their previous role. They were administering the governance of medical doctors, and they are medical doctors themselves. So I look at this as sort of resurrection of the medieval guild system, where only certain people were allowed to practice certain occupations. You had to have your license and your guild membership to do certain things. And if you stepped across the boundaries into somebody else's guild's territory, that was, forbidden. And you could be disciplined for that. And it's just like that's been resurrected. And now the doctors, the medical doctors, people with MDs, are the ones governing the NDs and saying, you can't do this, or else we're going to control very tightly how you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Historically, there was a time, not too long ago, but probably around 100 years ago, 100 plus years ago, when naturopathic doctors, homeopaths, hygienists, and herbalists, the eclectics were working alongside with the medical doctors. The American Medical Association was very small. It wasn't as powerful as what we see today, and they weren't well respected. They actually started a smear campaign to try to delegitimize all other forms of medicine. And for instance, Rockefeller started terms like it's quackery, it's unscientific, for everything that wasn't the conventional medical model. Well, using the Nazi/CIA/psychology repetition of a term in order to get people kind of brainwashed it, they've just repeated this over and over again for decades until here we are today, where a large portion of the population is actually believing this lie that medical doctors are the only legitimate and scientific practitioners of medicine, when there's so many other approaches from so many different cultures and methods.
Well, I actually think that people are more aware now of the different approaches than they were, for instance, when I was a kid. I used to walk by a herbalist shop near my father's business, and I used to look in the window and think, this stuff is absolutely crazy. And my parents didn't know anything about it. But now, I'm familiar with herbalists, and most people, there are so many more naturopaths and herbalists and acupuncturists around now. I think that most people know them, but right now information is being so tightly controlled that people aren't getting those messages, especially if they just want to go about their lives and not spend all of their time digging into this. Like, I'm spending huge amounts of my time now watching videos and reading stuff, and it's almost all consuming. And I know a lot of people who are woke about it. That's what we have to do, because stuff is moving pretty quickly. But ordinary people who don't feel that passion to know, they are watching the CBC here in Canada, and they are not getting any of this.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The division between people has become so evident. That division between those who are looking into things and are doing their own research and critical thinking what's going on. Even if you don't critical think, you could see certain things don't add up. They don't make sense. Why is this happening? Why are you something inside tells you something's wrong, versus people who are just eating it up, all the fear, the mainstream narrative, exactly what the government says. And never before has humanity, as far as I can tell, been so clearly, distinctly separated into those two camps.
Yeah, I agree. I'm seeing that too. I know that when I go to the supermarket, which I try not to do very often anymore, I got at one of the protest meetings a badge that says I am exempt. So that's what I wear. And I know that people are literally afraid of me because I'm not wearing a mask. If I get too close to them, they sort of like scurry away.
Yeah, that
And
fear.
it still boggles my mind every time it happens.
So here's a question for you, maybe a little philosophic, a little theorizing, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. What do you think? What do you think is behind a person's inability to, despite all of the breadcrumbs and the huge red flags everywhere, what is behind a person's inability to discern what is going on from the mainstream narrative, the way it's being depicted?
I think that most of them, and okay, so I belong to a local service club, for instance. I won't even mention the name, but I know that the most of my club members are ordinary people who haven't figured this out. There's about 3 or 4 who, especially because they know I'm really interested in it, they've been talking to me, and so I send them things, they send me things. So there's a few of them that have followed it, but I think most of the rest. It's not that they can't follow the dots or connect the dots. It's that they don't bother or are not willing to even see all the dots. So I know that I've sent stuff to people that I thought would be receptive, and they are totally clueless, and they really don't want to spend the time. I'm not sure whether they're outdoors gardening or I mean, what else can you be doing these days? You can't go anywhere. So I don't
Yeah,
know how they're spending their time, but
right.
either from peer pressure or fear or just a mental laziness, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of them like that.
a lot of good proposals. I'm not sure either. I have a potential theory as well that it's a tough pill to swallow. You know, the idea that you're being misled by the very people that are supposed to protect you,
Mhm.
that means that you're on your own to determine what's right from what's wrong or true. And a lot of people have been raised to not think for themselves. So the idea that the government and mainstream media is actually creating a false picture
Yeah.
and that you're on your own. I mean, not your, there's other like-minded people, but that's a big step for people. I think that's a hard step for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I'm, I take it because, as I said, I've been doing this for 50 years. I've been suspicious of the government all my life. My husband, is the same, and so we have our own little bubble. But people who have been in the habit of not questioning the government and just believing that, oh, everything's okay. This is too much. Even I find myself, some mornings I wake up and I think, is it all a bad dream? Or no, it's real. It's very hard to believe that this has come together the way that it has.
It is. It's just one of those things that you got to almost just like shake yourself about it. One of the nightmares that I find is, again, in naturopathic medicine, to have quite a few naturopathic doctors in support of the COVID-19 vaccination. And the idea that naturopathic doctors are not allowed to say, hey, vitamin D can really help prevent or mitigate the symptoms of COVID-19. They can't say that, but they can administer the vaccine
Yeah.
in Ontario. Like that seems just such a blaring, obvious discord. It's it racks my mind.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
the one that was really obvious to me right on early on in the pandemic, if you even think there was a pandemic, a lot of the people were reporting the symptoms of inability to taste and smell. And having studied nutrition, that just rang a bell for me and said zinc deficiency.
zinc, yeah.
And I've even approached a few professionals who were talking about. There was an article that came out, I think, in the National Post or the Globe and Mail about these 3 doctors who were looking into some kind of peanut butter test. So we give people an open jar of peanut butter, and if they can't smell it, we say, "Oh, you're going to be more susceptible to COVID." And I wrote to these people and said, a loss of the sense of smell and taste is a zinc deficiency. And I actually sent them some studies on that. And they wrote back and said, well, there's lots of things that can cause a loss of smell, but they don't seem to get it, that all of those things that they're seeing that cause a loss of taste and smell, the mechanism probably in every case is that it somehow depletes your zinc.
Yeah. That's highly interesting. Zinc has many functions in the body. That's an important one. And also interesting enough, also with the hydroxychloroquine, zinc is always suggested to accompany it. It helps that function as well.
Well, I actually went back to one of my nutritional textbooks to see what it said about zinc just a few days ago. And zinc is the central component of an enzyme called, I think it's carbonic anhydrase. And what the function of that is to break down carbon dioxide in the blood. So if you don't have enough of that enzyme, which you can't have if you don't have enough zinc, the carbon dioxide doesn't get properly disposed of by your body. And that's why these people can't breathe. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. That's one thing that's involved with the not breathing. I want to make a couple of addendums to what we're saying. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I normally wouldn't promote or condone the use of drugs in a situation where we have alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
However, even as a naturopathic doctor, I can see that this pharmaceutical hydroxychloroquine, we call it Plaquenil in Canada, it's been used for a long time safely, and it's an inexpensive, much better alternative than lockdown, killing the economy, scaring people to death, when they have a pretty good solution that would bring the number of deaths significantly according to the doctors that are using it. So I'm comfortable saying, hey guys, we could use hydroxychloroquine to change this whole picture. And one other thing, people get really upset when we discuss the idea that there's no pandemic, because people have died in these times. There are deaths.
Yeah.
The number of deaths that we can actually attribute to strictly COVID-19 remains to be really discussed. We really need to discuss that and look at it. I think the numbers are largely falsified and towards the narrative that we have a really bad pandemic, but there are people that are dying. And so I want to make a point that I'm not suggesting that nobody has died during these times. People have lost family members, because that's a little bit of an extreme way of expressing this, saying, there's no deaths at all. Like, I like to have more of a balanced expression than that. And you didn't say anything like that. I'm just for this discussion, I want to make that clear. But even looking at the World Health Organization statistics, the CDC, if you look at the statistics, it doesn't look like this condition, except in certain areas. We could talk about why, and perhaps you have an insight in that. It doesn't look that much more than a common flu, the death rate, I'm saying, than a common seasonal flu, perhaps a little bit on the robust end of the flu.
Yeah, and I mean, the figures that I've seen now, the CDC apparently has admitted that of all the deaths that have been labeled COVID in the United States, only 6% of them have been exclusively COVID with no comorbidities. So
that's right.
I think the important thing to do, and I've seen some graphs on this, but I'm trying to get my own from Statistics Canada. I've pulled down the database, but I haven't finished preparing the graph. The important thing to do is to look at excess deaths, right? So, if there were excess deaths this year, they might be COVID. They might also be lockdown deaths, right? There's a lot of people committing suicide. That's up. Domestic violence is up. Depression is up. So,
and also the number of procedures that haven't been given, like routine surgeries, cancer procedures, and by medical doctors, those are up too. Deaths because of that as well.
But the latest graph that I saw, which ended in August, it showed that there was definitely a peak as compared with, it was comparing to all the years from 2014 to 2019. There definitely was a peak for 11 weeks in March and April, and then it went back down to the point where it was way below. By August, it was the number of deaths in Canada from all causes was way below all of those 6 previous years.
Hmm.
So it's very interesting, and I'd like to get more complete data on that. But that's
Yes.
what we have to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at. I'd like to ask you something. We've noticed, those who are looking at this, and that the draconian measures. Actually, let me say this: the measures have become more and more draconian, more and more severe, more and more loss of freedom, with the threat on the horizon of greater yet, government control and the loss of freedoms. Where do you see this possibly going? What do we need to do to, as humanity, as people, to heal this situation in a healthy fashion that doesn't involve the loss of freedom, the injection of ID chips, and DNA altering vaccines and the likes of that?
Okay, so well, I think for starters, it would be nice if people were not being threatened with job losses for speaking what they believe to be the truth. It would be nice if the newspapers weren't censoring things, and people got off of Facebook, which is censoring things, and went to some of these other alternatives. One of the problems is that there are so many alternatives that we don't know sort of where the dust is going to settle and where most people are going to end up. So like I've opened accounts on Gab, Parler, MeWe, and Telegram, and you just sort of don't know where your friends are going to end up. But people have to be allowed to speak without fear of losing their income, losing their jobs, losing their licenses, and
Being canceled.
yeah. And it would be nice if the newspapers weren't being subsidized by the government now. Like the newspaper that I always subscribed to was the National Post. I used to write fairly often for the National Post as a freelancer, not a regular column, but now they won't publish anything that I send them. And from the people that I do know that still write for them, I'm told that their editorial department is pretty tightly controlled, but they've now accepted subsidies from the government. So
Yeah.
there's the old saying, he who pays the piper calls the tune.
Right. Right. So there's no longer a free press. There's been a few editors from the Washington Post, for instance, and New York Times, that have come forward and written the fact that it's a very, very tightly controlled system now, that you can't speak out against the commonly held narrative for even some of the social issues that are going on. There's just a monopoly of thought. It makes one think that we're moving into totalitarian times when people are not allowed to express except what is the acceptable, mainstream narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just one point that I want to raise. I wasn't sure whether you were trying to get at this a little bit earlier, but something that might give people a little bit of hope, maybe.
Yes.
There are people that are starting lawsuits against this, and certainly the governments are reacting in a way that's designed to shut them down if possible. So Ontario has got some legislation pending that will make it impossible to sue them. They've just eliminated all their tort liability through this legislation. But nevertheless, I know that there is Vaccine Choice Canada has started something. I give them a lot of credit for including a lot of things in there. They'll be fighting against the lockdowns and the masking and the distancing and all of that stuff, and against possible mandatory vaccinations. But I am also working with an organization called the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom. And we are anticipating that there will be mandatory vaccination laws. And that's what we are sort of narrowing the focus to that. So we want to be ready for a constitutional challenge to mandatory vaccination laws. So if any of the listeners there are interested in this, I myself have pledged to donate $1,000 to this cause. It's going to be expensive. And if people want to contribute to that, we're going to make sure that we have some of the very best and highly respected lawyers working on this. If people want to contribute to that, they can contact me. So they should be able to see my name there. So my email address is karen.selleck @gmail.com. Anybody wants to contribute to that, I can tell you more about it and, tell you where to send your money and how to make your check payable.
You know what? I'll put that up in the link after we're completed with this discussion, Karen.
Okay.
If
And
you'd
I
like.
just want, I forgot to mention that the organization, Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, is a registered charity. So when you donate, you will be able to deduct that as a charitable donation on your tax return.
That is so wonderful. I have utmost respect for you to be fighting the good fight. I really think that we're involved in a war here. It's a war of the mind. It's a war for the freedom of humanity. It's kind of the way I perceive it. So you're on the front lines. You're fighting the good fight for a good cause, for people's freedom, for the right to choose. I think a person's right to choose, for some reason, is part of all the befuddlement that's going on. People don't realize that they should have the right to choose for themselves.
Yeah.
What medicine they choose, what they put into their bodies, what they take. The very idea that somebody can mandate a person's choice for their health is absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
I agree. It is totally absurd, but this isn't the first time that I've run across it, because I was involved in some of the raw milk litigation. My client, Michael Schmidt, the well-known dairy farmer who has for 30 years now been involved in trying to legalize the sale of raw milk. And, we went before a judge and made arguments that under Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, you're entitled to life, liberty, and security of the person. And surely liberty includes the right to decide what you want to eat. But no, the judge says no. Liberty does not include the right to decide whether you consume raw milk or not. Michael always likes to point out, well, you're free to consume antifreeze, but you're not free to consume raw milk. Actually, you are free to consume it. It's just that nobody's free to sell it to you.
Oh, I see. So you won't be jailed for drinking raw milk if you had your own cow, say.
Right.
But if somebody prepares it for you yeah.
Yeah, the seller is the person that they're after. I can buy it and I won't be punished, but the seller, if they catch them, the seller will be punished.
Well, this is it's so wonderful to have your perspective, with your experience in the law, and you've been fighting these kinds of governmental over controls. I do think that there is a positive also coming. First of all, ever since this happened, I've hated to see all the measures that are being taken, but I have a good feeling about it. And part of the reason is, I'm a naturopathic doctor. I work with mind-body connection. Some things that I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but basically I believe that the body expresses illness. This is also a homeopathic principle. Mm-hmm. When there's a mistunement in the vital force. So there's a deeper level of disharmony or dis-ease in the person that manifests as physical disease. So humanity is like it's the macrocosm of all of us little cells, human beings living as microcosms in this macrocosm. So what's being revealed today is the fact that there are people controlling things, and a lot of people are waking up. Yeah. The control has been going on for a long time, but it's being revealed now more and more, which is a good sign. It's a sign of cure. So like fungus can't thrive in darkness, and neither can this kind of control. The fact that it's being revealed, I think, is a good sign that we're moving towards some resolution for a healthier humanity. What's going to happen in between, I can't predict how long of a bumpy ride it's going to be. I hope it's short and quick and we get over it quick. But I do have a good feeling that we're moving in the direction of what we call cure.
I hope you're right. I certainly know that there are a lot more people. I mean, I actually went to one of the protests in Toronto on a Saturday at noon in Dundas Square, and there were, I don't know, to my eyes, huge crowds of people. I think one newspaper said 1,000, another newspaper said 4,000. And to me, it looked more like the 4,000 was right. But it was encouraging to see all those people coming out and being mobilized. So, there's all kinds of inspirational sayings about how it only takes one person to change the world. Well, if it takes only one person, then there's 4,000 of them there.
Right.
Maybe something great will happen. But, it's going to be a very tight race to the finish line. That's my concern.
Yes, it's a tight race to the finish line. We're not sure which way it's going to go. Same kind of like with the election tomorrow. Good luck, Americans tomorrow. May it be for the best of humanity, if that's even possible with this election. And also on other countries, other nations, Belgian doctors, thousands of them standing up and speaking out against it. There's this movement of doctors that I saw recently. I have it on one of the videos. It's one of the featured videos. Doctors, lawyers, politicians standing up against these measures that are being taken. Thousands of lawyers in Germany, and medical doctors in Germany. And there's the Great Barrington Declaration happening of American doctors. Things are moving in a good direction. People are waking up. They are standing up.
Yeah, but even like the Great Barrington Declaration is international now. It's not just Americans. And in fact, I think it was actually written by three doctors in the UK.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I've lost my train of thought because someone's trying to interrupt me out there. So go on.
No problem. No, but that was a really good point that you just made.
Yeah.
I was including the Americans because they're definitely a part of that, and definitely you see the frontline doctors, and that's exciting. That's encouraging. I think that there has been, we were surmising what the reason was for some people to just not be able to see. And I think there has been quite a bit of social engineering that has occurred through social media, through mainstream media, news channels, movies, you name it, to the messaging, the repeated messaging without discernment can really alter a person's psyche, the way they think. And I think a lot of us, if we're not careful, we can also be socially engineered by repeated messaging.
Yeah, but I think it's been going on a lot longer than many people realize. So, for instance, in law schools, even when I went to law school, I was in law school from 1973 to 76. It's a long time ago. Even when I was in law school, I found the environment there pretty intolerable to my libertarian way of thinking. And I think it's only gotten worse over the years. So I've had friends say to me over the years, well, why don't you try and teach in a law school? And I know I wouldn't be able to stand the environment. It would just be too annoying for me to constantly be bumping heads against the people who believe differently than I do. So I know it's been creeping in for a long time.
Yeah,
and
you're
it's
right.
only now that it's, really come to a head. And the funny thing is, I find it kind of odd that of all things, it should be centralizing sort of around vaccinations, because up until I sort of became like an official anti-vaxxer maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that I started to really start thinking deeply about this because I was seeing, the movie Vaxxed and stuff like that.
Good for you. Good for you.
And a lot of people object to being called an anti-vaxxer. I don't even see why they would object to that. I am at this point. I don't know of any vaccine that I would be willing to take or that I would be willing to give to a child of mine if I had one. Even my dogs, I only give what's required by law, the rabies vaccine, and as minimally as possible.
Well, I can see, just to interject real quick, it's a label. It's become a label. As soon as you're labeled anti-vaxxer, well, then it's the end of conversation. You're one of those aluminum hat wearing freaks, like it's easy to dismiss.
But you have to be pushy about saying why it is that, like, I like to tell people I have read 9 books on vaccination. I actually have. I think it's probably 10 by now, including 2 from the other side. So there's Dr. Paul Offit, who is a very outspoken proponent of vaccination. I've read 2 books by him just to really, one of them was like sort of on a dare from a friend that I was trying to convince. He said, well, I'll read your book if you read one of the other side. So I did. And I'm pretty well informed on this now. And I think the evidence is just overwhelming that
Oh yeah.
the harm, the potential for harm and unseen harm. So not everybody has a very severe reaction, but I think there's, if people are getting mercury or aluminum accumulating in their bodies, um, all this epidemic of sort of chronic illness that we've got, people with arthritis, people with, heart problems and stuff.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that something that sort of came into my consciousness as recently as that has sort of coalesced as this is the main crux of what we're seeing now between liberty and authoritarianism. That to
Yeah.
me is really sort of surprising. It's all converging on the issue of vaccines.
That's right. It's true. That's why it seems like you can't mention anything that would maybe mean that you don't need a vaccine, for instance, to protect against this very scary
Yeah.
pandemic that they keep upping the ante to try to scare us more and more.
Yeah.
One of the things you were mentioning is that, wasn't a very free environment for you to express yourself as a libertarian studying. Well, in the naturopathic colleges, it's become very oppressive. The mainstream narrative is basically the only accepted one, and students that are not agreeing are feeling very afraid to express these things because they're being ostracized and shunned. And one of the attitudes of fellow students, and this we see also amongst our own naturopathic doctors, is this idea like we're all in this together and we got to protect each other. So if you're not wearing a mask, well, then you're selfish and you're putting everyone at risk, and it's a big team effort. That's one of the shaming pieces that we see in our profession.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and also the naturopathic colleges have systematically, not all of them, there's 1.5, I'm going to say 1.5. I'm not going to name which ones, but there's 1.5 colleges that are still clinging on. You know what? Let me give credit where credit is due. I'm gonna say 1 3/4. I'm not going to tell you how I'm dividing that percentage, but NUHS in Chicago has done a pretty good job, as far as I can tell, maintaining the principles of naturopathic medicine. I don't know if they're going to be overrun by whatever it is that has completely overrun CCNM, for example. And also Boucher out west in Canada has done some good efforts. They have good leadership there, and they're trying to maintain the integrity of our profession. And God bless them. All the power to them. Let me put it that way, to keep that up. But certainly, systematically, the elders in our profession have been removed systematically to replace it with NDs that are coming through and immediately going into to be supervisors in clinic, for instance, with no experience whatsoever. So this is not the best trend in our profession.
Yeah.
I want to ask you another question, and we could wrap up soon. I think I'm really grateful. We've had a wonderful discussion so far. Why keep naturopaths from speaking out? Why keep medical doctors from speaking out? Because it seems like a lot of people are actually in agreement, like that are speaking out. Why stop them? Why suppress them?
Well, that's the whole agenda of Bill Gates and cohorts, and I don't really understand what motivates them, because it seems as though there is some plan to reduce the population on Earth, which to me seems very bizarre. There was a book many years ago called The Ultimate Resource by a man named Julian Simon, who is an economist. And for him, the ultimate resource was the human mind. So no matter what happened in terms of, population density, he said, we will always be able to think our way out of this and improve things, because that is the ultimate resource. We can always work towards improving things. And, when I see an increase in population, I don't think this is terrible, they're going to use up all the world's resources. I think there's going to be more geniuses out there who will be able to help us find a way to resolve all of this.
Right.
So,
Right.
to reduce the world's population to me is a really ridiculous idea. And if anybody, I can't even imagine why anyone would think it's pleasant. Now, maybe if you're Bill Gates and you're a multi-billionaire, and you personally will not experience any of the hardship that all of the other people will see, then I guess he can tolerate it. I know that when I have traveled to countries that are, very poor, I haven't even liked to see poverty. It bothers me to see poverty. I would rather see everybody with a reasonable standard of living. So
Yeah.
I can't understand anybody getting any satisfaction out of what's going on right now, where people are being reduced to poverty.
Yeah.
Mystifies me.
Right. The consequences of these lockdowns has been severe. And we're seeing, like you said, an increase in deaths for other reasons because of the lockdowns. That's the basically the cure shouldn't be worse than the illness.
Yeah.
And what do we need to do? Like if you were the ruler of the world and you could actually wave a wand and get people to do something, what would you have them do? Or not, you're not the ruler of the world, because that's so like kind of what's happening. You have this magic wand and you want people to do something that will improve the situation. What do people have to do today in order to stave off what's coming?
They have to stop trying to govern other people. I mean, they have to go back to what I would call classical liberal principles, which is that the default position is that you are free to do anything that you choose as long as you don't harm somebody else. And the harm has to be something that you can, clearly show that you have harmed somebody. It doesn't have to, like they're trying to say, well, all of you people who walk around without masks and might be spreading droplets, we're afraid that you might harm somebody else, and so we're going to stop you proactively. That's
Right.
not the way the common law worked. That's not traditionally our legal history was. You dealt with something after when there really was a cause of action, when somebody really had actually been harmed and they can demonstrate the cause. You don't deal with it proactively by outlawing everything, because when you do outlaw all that stuff, you will also be outlawing good things that can happen. If you lock down everybody, going back, for instance, to the raw milk example, if you prevent people from consuming raw milk, there's a lot of evidence that has emerged from countries in Europe where it's legal that the consumption of raw milk actually reduces the incidence of allergies and asthma. And
Right. There's
asthma is a very
benefit.
serious illness. People die every year from asthma. So if you can reduce the incidence of asthma, that's a good thing. But to proactively say nobody gets to consume raw milk or nobody gets to sell it, that's throwing out the good with the bad. And
Yeah.
that's not the way we should govern.
And not to mention the fact that if, there's a lot of people that are very healthy, they're very robust. They're the idea that we have to like quarantine the whole world to control the situation because of the small chance of somebody being an asymptomatic carrier is absurd. For instance, there's just a lot of absurdities about the decisions and the governmental regulations that have come as a result of this. So what you said was, I appreciate your answer. You would wave the wand and you would get the people in control to ease up on that control. But let's say that's not going to happen and your wand only works for the regular people, not for the rulers, not for the governing class, but for the people. What you got to wave your wand? What would you want the people to do at this time? What must they do, would you say?
I guess there's a series of videos that I would have them watch. I would have them watch Vaxxed, Plandemics 1 and 2, a variety of things like that really would enlighten them as to what's really going on, and expose the corruption so that they would lose the respect that they have for the people who are in authority. It's a big problem. I mean, we were all raised to have respect for people in authority, and decades ago maybe that was warranted, but these days it's not. the people in authority are not acting in the best interests of everybody else. So they have to lose that respect.
Okay. So I think those are very, very sage ideas, that to inform people, have them watch the videos and enlighten them to what's going on, and then expose the corruption. How do you expose the corruption? What do you like? What action is taken? Because informing oneself, so now you're informed, but then what do you do?
After you're informed, you resist. I
How do
mean,
you resist?
well, I resist by not complying with what they have done so far. I have conducted myself pretty much throughout this in the ordinary way. I have not followed all the rules. I've gone to a protest meeting in Toronto where it was very delightful being able to act like a normal person. So, there were people standing in a crowd. There were people hugging each other. People brought their kids and their dogs, and it was just like normal times. And all of these people understood that they were not, spreading anything that couldn't be overcome. They weren't endangering others. The people standing, 2 feet away were not endangering them. It was good to see that protest. It was great. And I think people have to get out and do that. They have to be involved in these things. And they have to get out in such numbers that they won't have to worry about being arrested. That was the trick in Toronto. There was a large police presence there, but you'd have to send in an awful lot of police to arrest 4,000 people. So it didn't happen. Same with Randy Hillier. When Randy Hillier did his thing there in Queen's Park, I think they had a lot of people there. They had said, this is what we're going to do. We won't be socially distancing. We'll be standing there talking closely to people and not wearing masks. And if you really want to enforce your laws, come and get us. And they didn't take the dare.
That's so wonderful. There was a whole bunch of really young kids, I think, probably in their teens and maybe early 20s, running around. I think it was in London, yelling, herd immunity. Like they're just like having this party, gathering together, yelling herd immunity. Karen, I have even more respect for you that you're doing what it takes to you're taking the steps that it takes to not give the power to what's being enforced, that you've found a way. And as long as that's working now, thank goodness, it's so tremendous. Plus you're taking the action to fight for people's rights and to stop the mandating of vaccinations, which might come around the corner. They haven't clearly said that, have they? That they're going to mandate these vaccinations.
They haven't said it, but I mean, if there's lots of video of Bill Gates saying that's everybody in the world will have to be vaccinated or COVID will never end, and therefore the lockdowns will never end. The solution, and I think it's pretty clear that the population really believes that now. We won't get out of lockdowns until there's a vaccine, so everybody's eager for the vaccine.
It's been amazing for me to see how psychic and the ability to read into the future science has become. Like they know when the next wave is coming. They're telling you ahead of time. There's another wave coming. They know that these things are going to happen. They're being predicted, and never before have we seen such a breakdown of what you'd normally see as highly criticized by scientists to say, well, that's not science. There's no science there.
Well, there's so much fraud. I mean, the reason that we're having all these numbers of cases, increased numbers of cases, because we're testing more.
Yeah.
So, I actually wrote an article on this saying it's a numerator without a denominator. If you can say we've got all these positive test results, but unless you're putting that as a percentage of the cases that you've actually tested or the percentage of the people that you've actually tested, it's meaningless. We're probably getting a lower percentage of positive tests now than we were back in March, but because the absolute number of tests has gone up, we're getting these higher number of cases, and they're saying this is a reason to lock down. And no, it's not. It's the opposite. because
Right.
very few people are getting serious infections. Most of the people who were subject to serious infection from this in the first place have unfortunately already died. So the ones
Yes.
that are left are not going to be that seriously injured. And actually that leads me to another thought, something we haven't touched on, and you and I didn't talk about this earlier today when we were preparing for this, but do you even want to talk about the possibility that what's really happening here is 5G, is
Oh yeah.
electrical pollution? Because I'm becoming very interested in that idea. I've just been reading this book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, which a number of people had said, you've got to read that. And they were right. This is a really eye-opening book about the
So
effects.
we'll add that to the list of things that when you wave your wand, people should read that book.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to wrap up just a little bit what we were talking about before. Then we could talk about the 5G. I definitely have some, there's definitely some correlation between COVID and 5G. Is it the total cause, or is it exacerbating the symptoms along with other factors? I don't know, but I know that it's involved. And I know that it's curious. I guess we'll talk about it now. I'll jump back later. I know it's curious that, lockdown, 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 everything grinds to a halt, but super duper warp speed implementation of 5G globally. Like that's odd, that's very odd.
Yeah.
That
And then the second wave, right? The second wave, I mean, in part, the second wave is fraudulent because of the excessive testing that I mentioned, but I think the second wave might also be because we're seeing more and more 5G towers installed everywhere and becoming activated. So all these places that didn't have it before are getting it now.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, there's a ton of research and evidence demonstrating electromagnetic waves are not good for us. Cell phones, there's been tons of research just to show cell phones, Wi-Fi, this causes all kinds of health problems. 5G is all of that stuff on steroids, and it can be upscaled. So they've started kind of mildly, but I think it can be amped up at certain times of the day. I think they are doing that in areas, and during the night, it disrupts sleep. It actually, whatever it's causing, it really brings, illness to the next level. So I do think there is something involved there. There are some people suggesting the idea that, what we're seeing, exosome theory. Have you heard of exosome theory?
Yep. Yeah, I'm a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation, so I know about the book. What do they call it? The contagion myth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not sure I'm ready to say that there's no contagion of viruses. I've seen people get sick from being someone with an infectious illness. I'm not sure I'm ready to go there. But I have an open mind, and I'd like to discuss the possibility. But now, with excessive testing, you mentioned that. It's a good point. But I think that the PCR tests are kind of bogus to begin with. I've looked thoroughly into this, and the idea, basically the number of cycles that they have to run in order to get the positive results means a number of things. First of all, the creator of the test, I'm forgetting his name right now.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but
Kyle,
Carrie something, wasn't it? Carrie,
it's okay. Well, maybe
Carrie Mellis or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, what they've said, if you get up to such high levels of cycles, the amount of original material is so minute that it poses no risk, no infectiousness, no risk. That's number one. Number two is they've said that after a certain number of cycles, after 25 cycles, it's the whole test starts to become highly suspicious, and the results are completely off. You can see for yourself that the number of cycles that they're running in general are around 35, 36 to 38 cycles, which completely renders the testing illegitimate. So that's another factor in this whole picture, that the tests themselves, what they're basing all of this on, is kind of bogus.
Yeah. I've certainly heard that. It's, I don't know much about that kind of test and how it operates, but what you've just expressed is certainly what I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't make this connection, but Bill Gates, the World Health Organization, has a very strong influence in Canada. Like Trudeau tweeted out at the beginning of the pandemic, I think it was in April or March or April or maybe May, that they had just met with the Bill and Melinda Gates, and they're doing everything they can to implement these suggestions. How on earth are people not going, what the heck? Like Bill and Melinda Gates, they're not medical doctors. They're not health experts. How is it that they are determining the policy for all Canadians, for instance, and of course elsewhere? What do you think about that?
I have the same reaction that you do. And in fact, I will. So I didn't mention before the service club that I belong to. I'll mention it now because it's pretty well known. It's the Rotary Club. And Rotary has a very long-standing connection with Bill Gates, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they're tight like this. Rotary has been doing these vaccinations in the third world against polio for decades, I think. And
Yes.
I've been trying to convince some of the members of my club that these polio vaccinations have become extremely problematic. There's people being paralyzed from the vaccine version of the polio virus in the third world, and it's not just a small number, it's huge numbers.
It's hundreds of thousands.
Yes, hundreds of thousands of people have been damaged by those vaccines. And I saw another extremely interesting video recently. Mickey Willis, the guy who was the director of Pandemic 2, he had observed that 10 years ago, when he first started looking into this, there was plenty of discussion on the internet, and there was video footage of Bill Gates in India and Bill Gates in Africa, rolling out these vaccination programs.
Yeah.
And then there was lots of information about how they were harming people. And he observed that when he went to look for it now, it had all been scrubbed. You can't find that stuff on the internet anymore. So he has gone to India to speak to some of those original people who were involved, like the Indian legislature, whatever it's called.
They threw him out.
They had whole inquiries into this, and they legislated against this and asked the Gates Foundation 10 years ago or whenever it was to leave and don't come back.
Yes.
But that's all been whitewashed now. It's all been forgotten, and they're back.
And under another name, basically, I heard.
I'm not sure about that, but I can't remember the name of the video, but it was the
Corbett Report.
Some other guy, Ben Swan, I think his name might be. Ben
Okay,
Swan
well, there's a really good film. Like if I could wait.
Willis.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that? I was talking at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a guy named Ben Swan,
Okay.
SWANN, interviewing Mickey Willis.
Okay. Okay, so if I could wave my wand, I would have people watch the Corbett Report.
Yes, that's good too.
Who is Bill Gates? An excellent piece of investigative reporting.
Yeah,
and it really does
change. Yeah, it certainly changed my understanding of who Bill Gates was.
Yeah.
I thought he was the kid in his garage who and he's not.
No, it's tremendous, his influence, and he basically has feelers out everywhere, including I surmise, that I don't necessarily have proof for this, but the fact that the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, the president and some naturopathic doctors are backing this movement to vaccinate. The Bill and Melinda Gates money has probably somehow trickled down to influence that as well.
My guess. Yeah. I agree. There's probably, the famous expression, follow the money. I imagine if you were to find out who's funding what, you'd find that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been fantastic. Do you have any closing thoughts? Like, I watch, sometimes I watch Candace Owens, and she has a person say like 3 minutes, like give us a 3-minute blast of everything that you want, all your wisdom, just pack it all into,
this isn't the best time of day for me, so I'm really not up for that. I guess I just want to remind people that if you are interested in contributing to the legal challenge with some, an excellent team of lawyers,
Yeah.
get in touch with me and I'll make sure that your donation gets applied appropriately. And it is a tax deductible charitable donation, the way I'm arranging it.
That's amazing. So I will put that information up. After a live, it goes to the previously viewed part of the page of our website.
Okay.
So anybody that comes in, that'll be available. That information will be available to empower that movement, because that is a hugely important movement. And I hope that the rule of law is still in proper functioning.
Well, I mean, part of the problem that we will encounter in that will be, so even if we demonstrate that a mandatory vaccination would violate the Section 7 right to life, liberty, and security of the person, which I think the court could easily buy that. There's a Section 1 of our charter which says that in a free and democratic society, certain things are necessary, and in those conditions, the state can override the charter right to life, liberty, and security of the person. So if judges are just ordinary people, which many of them are, including Supreme Court judges, if they're not spending their time watching Plandemic 1 and Plandemic 2, they won't know this. And so it will take a lot of work to get the evidence before the court that's really needed to demonstrate that vaccinations are not the only way to go, that they probably will cause more harm than good, that there are other ways to deal with COVID if it really does exist. So that's going to be a challenge, because judges are, ordinary people who have other things to do with themselves than watch videos.
Right, exactly. They got to read those 150 books that are on their shelves,
Yeah.
super thick books. Okay, well, thank you so much, Karen. I truly appreciate it, and I can almost speak for a lot of our like-minded friends in our profession that we really appreciate you coming forward and adding your legal wisdom, and your libertarian wisdom and your humanitarian self to this conversation.
One more thing. Sorry, just one more thing that I want to mention. So
Yeah, sure.
I'm not in private practice anymore myself. In fact, I'm not in practice at all. The Law Society considers me retired and I can't practice law, but I do still have lots of friends who do practice law. So if there are people, I don't know whether they'll be watching from all across Canada, but I know some people I know a lawyer in BC who would be excellent at this sort of thing. If anybody is going to get, charged or threatened by whatever their college is in these other provinces, there are people in BC and Alberta that I know, and somebody in Ontario that, there's already somebody in Ontario who's representing this Dr. Turner that I mentioned. So, I can probably refer you to people who will be good at making sure that you get the best result legally.
Wow, that's a great idea. Well, I think we may need that. I can imagine that that's going to be very important. So to have that resource from you as well is great. And of course, people can contact you through the same means, through the archive video. So thanks again, Karen, and
Welcome.
perhaps we'll have you again on here if it suits you.
Okay.
And
when there's something new to talk about.
yeah, right. Well, good stuff. So take care and all the best. And thank you everybody for watching. And please spread the word. Please add your name to the list if you're intimidated by Kono, or you're intimidated by whatever governing body or the social justice warrior mob that might come after you. Just put a non, but your name, adding your name as an ND or as a supporter from the public helps. Everything helps. So take care and all the best, everyone.